That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The British Constitution provides that taxation and representation shall go together. Therefore, women taxpayers are entitled to vote.
I have a dream today. Let freedom ring, and if America is to be a great nation, this must become true.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Only Human podcast. Today, we're going to continue our Season 3 focus on self-awareness. More specifically, we're going to continue our discussion on motivation. So remember a couple of weeks ago, we started out by talking about inspiration and how that was the spark, maybe driven by our curiosity or just something we heard or saw or experienced that inspired us to look a little bit deeper at something. And then there was a little bit of commitment involved, which led to the motivation stage. And the motivation then kept us moving forward on some path or project or desire towards some maybe ill-defined goal at the moment. Well, today we're going to take the next step. And that next step is perseverance or persistence. And I want to start, like we so often do, with a Blue Threat proverb of the week. And initially, it might not resonate with this idea of perseverance, but I think you're going to see where it ties in here in just a couple of minutes. So here it is. Blue Threat proverb of the week says, a bad day doesn't equal a bad life. A bad day doesn't equal a bad life. And the subtext on the poster says, the ability to see the sun on the other side of the rain is one of the most significant skills anyone can possess. Persistent hope and commitment to a brighter future drives us onward to better days. So as we begin to talk about perseverance, as we begin to talk about persistence, you start to get a hint that we're going to come up against some rainy days. Right? And that's what perseverance is all about. There's a great quote by author Walter Elliott that says, perseverance is not a long race. It's many short races, one right after the other. Right? So that's the essence of today's podcast. How do we keep this commitment to keep on going, even after that initial spark of inspiration led to motivation, and we're chugging down some path, and then we start asking ourselves, is it worth it? Right? Or we run into some trouble, some obstacles, some challenges that get in the way, and we try to find a different way, a softer way, an easier way, and we can't find it, and so we give up. I think one of the primary things I'd like to get across to you today is that the world needs more finishers. Right? One of my personal goals in life is to finish what I start, whether it's my marriage, a new book project, some aspect of construction here on the Emerald Star Ranch, or whatever it is. And that can get in the way in a lot of ways for me psychologically, because I often start too many things, right? My beautiful wife always likes to say, why don't we pick this stuff up from Home Depot? Because I know that project, although you're not ready to start it yet, we'll have the supplies when you're ready to. And I just can't do that. Because if I have something reminding me that there's something undone, it weighs on me to the point where I just can't persevere on any task because I'm weighed down by all of the other ones that are waiting, right? So I think part of this whole idea of perseverance is to understand yourself. I understand myself that if I have too many things ongoing, I'm not going to finish any of them. And that was part and parcel. I talked to either last week or the week before about my new book, Armored Knight, and how it started out as 3 different books and how eventually that just drove me crazy. And so I quit on all of them until one day I had a bit of inspiration And I wonder if these things really could be combined. And from there, it led to the motivation to look into how I might do that. But there were still a lot of rainy days in the future on that project. That's why it took me 5 years to complete it. But there were so many opportunities to give up, right? So the commitment to keep on going, even after that initial inspiration and motivation fades or new challenges arise, that's really one of the absolute keys to success. I'm going to reach in my pocket here because I usually have this thing with me, but I don't know whether I do or not. Well, I do. One of the things I carry around with me, I don't know, you can probably not see this very well, but it's a coin. I've had it with me for decades. It's a quote from, you read that? Probably not. It's a quote from Marcus Aurelius. And it says, the impediment to action advances the action. What stands in the way becomes the way. In our classic Twitter feed society, that's been dumbed down just to say the obstacle is the way. And so when something presents itself as an obstacle to us, that can be the direction that perseverance will be required to go, right? I'm not saying not to walk around the mountain, because I'm a big fan of finding the most efficient pathway to completing anything. But every once in a while, you have to take the obstacle on. So that's what today's episode's all about, why perseverance is so crucial for long-term success. And we've already talked a little bit about how it differs from motivation, but we really want to give you some actionable ways to figure out how to be more perseverant. Is that a word? So if I were to capture it in an even shorter definition, I'd say perseverance is the mental toughness to move forward in spite of things that are trying to tell you not to, right? Inspiration is a spark. Motivation is still the emotional element that drives us forward. But perseverance is something different. It's not really driven by emotion. It's driven by habit. Right? So way back when we were talking about psychosocial strength, you'll remember there's 4 types of strength that combine into our psychosocial strength or our mental fitness. There's cognitive strength, there's emotional strength, there's spiritual strength, and there's behavioral strength. So emotional strength is what inspiration and motivation are all about. But when we move into perseverance, we're talking about something that is a behavioral strength. It's a habit. And so if we can create the habit of finishing, the habit of continuing, that will keep us moving through the highs and lows. So speaking of lows, I'm going to break from tradition here. We're going to play a little 41-second video, and it's really a sort of not the most famous movie clip out of the Rocky movies. Rocky Balboa, remember him fighting Apollo Creed, and there's like Rocky 1 and 2, which are pretty good, and then like all the way up to Rocky 77, which kind of got progressively worse. And I don't even remember what this clip is out of, but I'll set the stage for you. Rocky's about to come out of retirement to fight another heavyweight championship bout. And he's got his teenage son with him. And his teenage son is upset, right? Because he says things like, "Dad, you know how hard it is being your son. Everybody compares me to you. And I'm just trying to come out on my own. And now you're going to do this, and that's just going to ruin my life." And they're out walking on the streets of Philadelphia. I think it's Philadelphia. And Rocky turns around to have a discussion with his son. So we're going to play that for you, and then we'll come back and talk about it in about 41 seconds.
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is gonna hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Now, if you know what you're worth, now go out and get what you're worth. but you gotta be willing to take the hits and not pointing fingers saying you ain't where you want to be because of him or her or anybody. Cowards do that, and that ain't you. You're better than that.
I really draw inspiration from that clip. I told you I've got a poster of it up on my wall in my workout room. But that's the question, isn't it? How hard can you get hit and keep moving forward? That is the essence of the biggest challenge we face in perseverance. There's another word that's used. We've used it for a long time, but it became sort of famous by a researcher named Angela Duckworth. And the term is grit, right? It's sticking with your future, day in, day out, day after day, grinding it out, making progress, right? Grit is the long-term application of perseverance. And we all have lots of goals, and we've talked about setting goals. When we set ambitious goals, 5-year out goals, 10-year out goals, maybe 20 years out in front of us goals, if we don't have grit, that is that long-term application of perseverance, it's unlikely we're going to achieve them. I am not personally a goal-driven person. My goal is to keep better, keep getting better, keep finding new ways to do the things that I think I've been put on earth here for. But when I start a project, even a 5-year one like the last book, I am a finisher. And so I have a goal, right? To create the best piece of helpful literature I can create for my readers. And so I'm not the only one like that. And you know, I talk a lot about writing because I'm a writer. But when you think back, and I've used her example before, but J.K. Rowling, who endured multiple rejections of her work, right? All kinds of personal setbacks, life setbacks, writer's block, burnout. But she kept chugging on the Harry Potter series, right? And eventually it turned out very, very well for her, right? Very, very well. And this sort of grit exemplifies perseverance and how it differs from motivation. Because imagine, you don't have to imagine, think of a time when you got derailed from something you were really close to or you really wanted and you were really striving for, and something got in the way and bam, it's gone. It's off the table. What did you do? How did you feel, right? And obviously it wasn't a good day, right? But remember, one bad day doesn't make a bad life. And whether that particular goal will ever come back in front of you again and you can strive to achieve it or not, the key is you learned from that. And if you only learned one thing, you learned that when you don't get something you want, you keep moving forward. Like Rocky says, you got hit, the world knocked you to your knees, but it will keep you down there permanently if you don't deal with it. So how do we want to develop this grit? How do we want to develop this mental toughness that leads to our perseverance? It's critical that we develop the habit pattern of what a lot of people refer to as a growth mindset, right? Where a challenge is exciting rather than threatening, right? And when that's the case, even when the obstacle is the way, and you try to climb that mountain and you just can't get up there, man, you just can't get up there. And you reveal some weaknesses about yourself that you learn about yourself. Right? Here's a chance to grow. That's the mindset. Here's a chance to grow. It changes this, oh man, I thought I was going to get there, to it was a really great experience and I learned something. So maybe the next time I'll be able to tackle that mountain just a little bit smarter. You can think about a lot of things. You know, I happen to be very blessed to know a few Olympic athletes. And these guys, the ones that I know, they train for years, and I mean years, for one chance at a medal, right? They don't just want to be an Olympian, they want to win an Olympic medal. They want to win the gold medal. And they train for years and they get there. And one of my dear friends is a pentathlete. And one of the first things he had to do was shoot a pistol out on this range. And after his first shot, he knew he was off the medal stage. And yet he had all these events to continue on. And he did very well. And this guy is one of the most awarded pentathletes in U.S. history. But then they get there and they fail. And there are so many of them, especially in some of these sports like, swimming and track and field, where they don't medal or they don't medal as high as they wanted to. And they go back into it all over again. Right? All over again, 4 more years of striving for that 3-day event. So it gives you an idea of how important a long-term vision is, but perhaps even more importantly, how that habit of daily growth, of keeping the end in mind, but even when that end seems distant and dark, being able to have the habit patterns to say, today I'm going to put in the work, today I'm going to get a little bit done, et cetera, et cetera. So what is the brain stuff going on, the psychology, I guess, of perseverance? What is it? Well, I think it's 2 parts. I think it's self-discipline, which we've already hinted pretty strongly at, but I also think it's delayed gratification, right? There's always a more pleasant thing to be doing than working toward a long-term goal that appears very distant, right? And there's a really famous study about this. And I remember, gosh, I studied it when I was in college. And so that was back in the 1970s. So this had to have been done in the 60s or the early 70s. And it's famously called the Stanford Marshmallow Experiment. It was done by a guy named Walter Mischel. And he took some 4 to 6-year-olds and he brought them into a room and he put a marshmallow in front of them and said, if you can wait 15 minutes and not eat this marshmallow, I'll give you a second marshmallow. And then he left them alone. There's a lot of holes in this. It's been attacked, right, by a lot of different scientists over the years, but it's still a very famous experiment. And it's what you call a longitudinal experiment. So out of that, how many do you think ate the marshmallow? About 2/3 of them ate the marshmallow. But about 1/3 of them didn't. They understood if they waited, they would get double the points, double the marshmallows. And then they followed those kids for years moving forward. And they discovered a lot of things. They did better in school. They did better socially. They did better professionally. They led healthier lives. It's hard to account for all the variables, and that's why this study's been attacked so much. I mean, different socioeconomic things, different parenting. Maybe some kids didn't have breakfast. I mean, you think they'd account for that. But at any rate, they found that the kids that could wait and delay the gratification did much better in life. Because even by age 4, 5, and 6, they developed some sense of this idea of reward for delaying gratification. Where that came from, I don't know. And once you understand that staying focused on the mountain in front of you, instead of allowing all the distractions that we have coming at us day to day to pull us away from whatever it is we're seeking, we have a much better chance of long-term success, even if we don't achieve that goal we're directly aiming at in the moment. So I think maybe it's time to turn to how we can actually develop better perseverance. And the first thing I want to tell you is tied to almost everything I do in my own life, and it also is something we've talked about before. You have to understand why you're doing something. Right? That why is huge. For me, that's why I have a life purpose statement. Oh no, he's not going to say it again. Yes, he is. To help as many as I can, in as many ways as I can, in as many places as I can, for as long as I can, all for the glory of God. Right? I know that. I know it by heart. I think about it every day because if I'm doing something that feeds that why, I can stick with it longer. Right? I think it was Viktor Frankl. I could be wrong about this. No, I'm not, because the book was called Man's Search for Meaning. And he said, those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how. Right? Holocaust survivor. He had a why to live, and so he could survive all the horrors of the Holocaust. Which leads us to a second thing that we've talked about in the past, and that is the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. The why is an internal reward. Why am I doing this? Because it feeds my purpose, right? It feeds my life goal. If I have an external award, extrinsic reward, it would be something like, I'm doing this because I need to get this book published so that I can get more business. Right? That is a far less powerful goal for me. So, lesson one, if you want to develop perseverance, tie it to something that's internally important to you. That's probably not a job promotion or something that's obviously an external reward. It's probably something that means something more important to you as a human being and why you're here, right? So it's important to have that deep personal why behind a long-range project if you can. Okay? The next thing I think that's important is, I guess the term would be self-compassion. It's really easy on long-term goals to see it as, everything's going to be a growth experience and I'm going to smile through the setbacks and all that stuff. But sometimes you just don't. Sometimes you just do stupid stuff and I write dumb pages and I have to delete entire chapters, or I say the wrong thing when my goal is to build relationships and all those things. And you just want to beat yourself up for it. You go, I got so far off track there that there's no sense pursuing this any longer. I have absolutely screwed this up. Okay? And that's a moment when you got to say, look, bub, you're doing all right here. You did something dumb. You did something that wasted some time. You did something that didn't fit into anything else that you were trying to do on this. But give yourself a break, man. You're in a lot of pressure. You put a lot of pressure on yourself. The world threw you a curveball, whatever it is. Self-compassion is about recognizing that the setback or suffering is just part of it, right? You're going to get mad at yourself. Other people may get mad at you. You may have, external disincentives when somebody says, well, why are you working on that when you could be working on this? All of those things tie to this idea of self-compassion, right? You're only human. That's why we have this podcast. Self-compassion is important because it prevents burnout, right? And it allows you, once again, to approach the challenge that says, hey, screw this up. I'm going to reset, get back in starting blocks, and I'm going to keep chugging away on this thing. So a couple of different things. Understand your purpose and try to tie any long-range, difficult, challenging things that you're dealing with that you have to persevere through to your purpose. And the second thing, along the way, have a little self-compassion for the mistakes and challenges that you know are coming. Okay, so a couple of other things, and again, we've talked about them in the past. When it came to motivation, we talked about setting small, achievable goals, getting those little wins. Well, that just keeps on rolling into perseverance, grit, and mental toughness. I always refer back to the Kaizen philosophy. Small, continuous progress. leads to big results over time, right? James Clear in Atomic Habits tells us that those habits of progress build compound interest. So an hour that I put in a month from today, based on the habits that I'm developing today, are going to have more emphasis, more efficiency, more power than an hour I put in today. So I know that by developing these work habits, these thought process habits, that in the long term, they're going to have a really exponential impact on the work that I'm doing or the progress that I'm making. Excuse me for 1 second. I love my Pepsi Zero. So why is that important? Why is that important to your motivation, to your perseverance? It's important because if I know that putting in an hour a month from now is going to get me 4 times what an hour does today, that means that my goal is closer than I think, or maybe even closer than I can estimate, right? It means the more I stick with it, right? The more I sit down in the early morning hours to write my 1,000 words a day that I want to write in order to achieve this goal of another book or something like that, means that hour a month from now may produce 1,500 words or 2,000 words, and maybe they're better words, right? So I want to encourage you to create daily habits around your goals, right? Realizing that those habits are going to pay dividends in the future. And so that's going to accelerate your motivation, which will bring the emotional component back into it a little bit, right when you need it, hopefully, and make that a natural part of your routine. The other thing I'd say that's sort of important, I'm not over the moon on this because I like to work alone, but it's important that you at least have a few like-minded people that are also engaging in long-range projects that you can bounce things off of. We've talked before about mentors and proteges and those types of relationships. Maybe it's those, or maybe it's just a friend, right? Think of people that are in running groups or prayer chains or writing circles or any other type of professional network where people encourage each other to keep going, keep writing, keep running, keep praying. All those things are beneficial because we've surrounded ourselves with a little bit of a support network. All right, I guess I would like to pull this all together with a recap here. And I think we have one more podcast that will cement it all together from the spark of inspiration through the early emotion of motivation to the dark work, right? The hard work. Understanding that the world's going to knock us to our knees and we have to be able to take a hit and keep moving forward, which is the perseverance. Understanding that the obstacle is the way in many cases, but it doesn't have to be if there's a shorter or more efficient way around it. I think the points that we've made today about developing habit patterns of perseverance relies only minimally on having some written down goal or objective. I think the goal or objective is merely progress, daily progress toward some positive end. Right? If you recognize that at the end of the day, at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock when I finish my workday, if I can look back and say, didn't make much progress today, but you know what? I made some. I'm practicing that self-compassion that's going to keep me moving forward. So I'd like you to take any one of those tips today and apply it to some current challenge that you might be facing. And I'll close this podcast with this statement, quote from Calvin Coolidge, who said, "Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not, because there's nothing more common than unsuccessful men with talent." He went on to list a lot of other things. Intelligence won't do it. et cetera, et cetera. But the person that keeps their nose to the grindstone and keeps pushing forward is the person that's going to get things done. And eventually that's going to come back to us and make us more efficient, more confident, more powerful in taking on the challenge that we all face. So lots of things for you to think about here over the next week. I want to thank everybody for tuning in again on this season of self-awareness. We're going to be looking at a lot more things about self-awareness over the next 10 to 12 episodes before we transition to a new topic. Like always, thank you so much for listening. Please, I hope you can take something from this and put it in your daily life, because we want to get better where we are with the resources that we have at hand. Thanks, and I'll see you soon.